After a long and thorough search process, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association has named the organization's next Chief Executive Officer. And joining us now is the new CEO, Colin Woodall. Colin, thanks so much for joining us, and congratulations.
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here with you, and I'm really looking forward to the challenge of being the next CEO of NCBA.
For folks who have watched our show, they've seen you obviously before, but let's go back a moment and just share a little bit about your personal background.
Well, I've been with NCBA for about 15 years now, and most people recognize me as the chief lobbyist, and we've had a lot of fights and a lot of good wins over the years. But before that, I worked for a U.S. Senator from Texas, got the opportunity to see how Capitol Hill works. Before I came to Washington, D.C., spent some time out in western Kansas managing grain elevators for Cargill, and had a great opportunity trading the feedlot markets, especially in the panhandles of Oklahoma and Texas. I'm a Texas native. I grew up participating in 4-H. I'm an Eagle Scout and graduated from Texas A&M University.
And we won't hold that against you.
I appreciate that.
I'm just kidding. No, seriously, you mentioned the wins you've had in Washington, D.C., and many connect you as being a person who has really led that effort over the last several years. But folks can be confident that things are in good hands in D.C., even with you coming to Denver. Talk a little bit about the team that we have in place back there.
Well, that's the great part about this transition, is it's not just about me. It's about the association as a whole. And what we've been able to do is not only move me up to CEO, but also bring in Ethan Lane to be the Vice President of Government Affairs. Many of your watchers will recognize Ethan's name. They've seen him on the show before, and they know that he has been the Executive Director of our Public Lands Council. But Ethan and the entire team in Washington, D.C. are seasoned veterans. They've been through multiple farm bills, multiple trade deals. They have really been able to distinguish themselves as players in Washington, D.C., and more importantly, to be able to deliver on all the policy priorities of this association.
I'm sure this is a question you've gotten by many journalists, but I have to ask you, what's your vision for NCBA moving forward?
I have received that question quite a bit, but you know, it's not about my vision, it's about the vision of the association. And the vision of this association is pretty strong. We want to be the leaders, the trusted leaders, and the definitive voice of this association. Those are pretty strong words, and it allows us to move forward and implement that. And when you step back a little bit and think about how we become that trusted leader and that definitive voice, it's through things such as the Beef Long Range Plan, through our policy priorities, through all of the decisions that have been made by our members to set us in the right direction. It's my job as CEO to make sure that we execute and deliver on all of those. So as you really look at this, it's not about just Colin Woodall's vision. This is about the vision of the association and the industry as a whole.
Yeah, that's helpful clarification, unlike maybe that of a corporate CEO that is expected perhaps to have his own vision. You are enforcing and executing against the vision of a very grassroots-driven organization. Fair enough?
And that's what gives us all of our strength and our powers, because we are a grassroots association. It's not about the CEO's vision. It's about all of the decisions made by the members of this association who show up to our meetings, who vote on policies, and who ultimately support us in achieving those policies.
But you still are an organization's voice, and you use that voice pretty firmly in several of your first days as a leader. I think you penned an op-ed called Smear Campaign. Tell us a little bit about what prompted you to write that article and what you hope it'll accomplish.
The officers and the members of the association have been very clear. They want NCBA to be the leader. They want us out there fighting for this association, fighting for its members, and pushing back. And that's exactly what we did with the Smear Campaign piece. The Organization for Competitive Markets, OCM, is a group that claims to represent cattle producers. But what we have found is they're actually just a puppet group for the Humane Society of the United States, HSUS. Their executive director, Joe Maxwell, has worked for HSUS and been an operative of theirs. Their communications director has worked for HSUS. So when you see OCM, you're seeing HSUS and vice versa. And it was time that we called them out, because what they said is that we were granting ourselves checkoff dollars. Well, they failed to realize the entire process of how this works, Kevin. And it's the Beef Promotion Operating Committee made up of cattle producers, some who are NCBA members, some who are not, that ultimately make the decision of who gets to be a contractor. And we are one of 8 contractors. And in fact, we didn't even get all the money that we had asked for. So it's important to put things in perspective and to call out when misinformation is put out there in the airwaves like OCM did.
Colin, you mentioned earlier that NCBA had a couple of big wins, and certainly chief among those was the repeal of WOTUS. Why was that so important to the industry, and how did NCBA work to make that happen?
waters of the United States was nothing more than a government land grab. This was EPA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers telling cattle producers how they can and cannot use their land. As you can imagine, that's a slap in our face and a slap to private property rights. So this is something we've been working on for well over a decade, and it really formalized itself in what became the 2015 Obama WOTUS rule. We knew that we had to take this burden off of cattle producers. So we worked very hard as an association, both with the members of Congress and also with the Trump administration, to make them very clear that this was unacceptable, that we had to take these restrictions off of cattle producers. And fortunately, President Trump agreed with us. And so we've been able to work with the EPA to not only repeal the WOTUS rule, which just happened, but also talk about what's next in terms of water regulation, because water regulation is extremely important. We have to have clean water in order to have cattle operations. We just need to make sure we do it without taking our private property rights away.
Right. Exactly. Another key achievement that many of us applauded was the recent bilateral between the United States and Japan, something that we were hoping for since we pulled out of TPP. Why is that so important to the beef industry?
It's important because what it does is it puts us on a level playing field with all of our competitors, including Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, those who are trying to beat us in that Japanese market. And they were doing a pretty good job here in 2019 because their tariffs were lower. Basically, their tax was lower. And anytime you have a lower tax, you have the ability to sell more product, and we saw that. We needed to be able to get back on that level playing field, have the same tax across the board. That's what this deal did, and we know that anytime we're on a level playing field, we will always win on taste.
Absolutely. Very confident of that.